welcome tonight. We're going to be making some vegetable soup, and this is my mother, and she has canned all her life. She taught me to can, but she's never put up vegetable soup. So I'm at her house and we're going to show her how to put up vegetable soup. First, listen to her canning story.
I bought my Presto pressure cooker in 1966. I couldn't afford to buy it at one time, so I bought it at a hardware store in Moultrie, Georgia. And I had to make payments on it by the month. I can't remember how much it cost, but it was a lot back then. I did a lot of canning.
What was the first thing you canned?
Probably green beans.
And who taught you to can?
My mother,
Did she have a pressure cooker?
she had a pressure cooker, yes.
So what did y'all use before you had a pressure cooker?
She had a pressure cooker as long as I can remember, but she probably had one of those cold pack canners that you can for hours, probably.
We have prepared all the ingredients ahead of time. So all we have to do is mix them together and cook it and then pressure can it. So we've got 2 pots here, about 3/4 full of tomatoes. And to this we're going to add 2 quarts of peas to each of these boilers. Over behind the boilers you can see my sister Camille. She is my oldest sister and she actually has dementia, and we try to spend at least one day a week with her, and she is a joy to be around, and she's willing to help with anything. The second item is 2 quarts of butterbeans. In the north you might call these lima beans, but these are fresh also. And you can add a little more, a little less, or if there's any ingredients that you do not like, just leave them out. We're putting in 2 quarts of onions chopped coarsely. And I actually helped my mother's sister. She's the one who introduced me to this recipe probably 20 years ago. And we did it several years together. And these pressure canners, one is my mother's, and who is 76, and one is my grandmother's, who is 95. Now this calls for bell pepper, and we're putting 1 quart of bell pepper in each boiler. If you're not a fan of bell pepper, you can substitute this for any other pepper. I'm not a big fan of bell pepper, but I actually like it in the soup. So we're just going to split this 2 quart bowl between both boilers. It also calls for banana peppers, and the actual ingredient calls for 12 pods of banana pepper finely chopped. The next ingredient is cream corn, and we did cream this corn several weeks ago and put it in the freezer and thawed it out last night so we could have some fresh corn for our soup. And the soup would be really thick. So it calls for 2 quarts of cream corn. So we'll add that to each boiler. And you can never have too much cream corn. The next is okra. And again, 2 quarts of okra in each boiler. And we're about to run out of boiler here. Now we're going to add a 1/2 cup of sugar. And this is such good memories, canning with your family. And my mama is the one who actually taught me to can. The next ingredient is celery, and it calls for 2 stalks of finely cut celery. Don't know if we're gonna have room here for everything. We're cutting it mighty close. Now I don't think I caught it on the video, but the other ingredients are a half cup of vinegar to each pot and 5 teaspoons of canning salt. Look at all that goodness. You want to do this in a thick boiler because you don't want none of it to stick, and you're going to have to stir it the entire time. Nothing better on a cold winter day than open up some of this soup.
Smile, Camille. Wave. Say hi. What you doing?
Just watching y'all.
Say canning soup.
Yep.
You know, she was double timing it here and her arms got a little tired. Now when it starts foaming, we always scoop off the foam, and that's just a result of some enzyme in the tomatoes. So to each jar we add a teaspoon of canning salt, and this is totally optional. It's mainly for flavor. Mama's making a funny face there. Now we're going to ladle our soup into our jars. This is really hot, so be careful. You know, make sure you wipe those rims off after you ladle that soup in. You don't want anything interfering with that seal. Look at these hands, y'all. She's 76 and she's canned probably since she was 10 years old. So you're looking at 66 years there in those hands. Isn't that just awesome? A lot of love, a lot of care, a lot of memories. Growing up, I really didn't care for canning. I hated when summer rolled around and we spent all day in the kitchen. But now I treasure those memories. And the aunt that had this soup recipe, who's since passed, we actually got all her jars that she had stored up, and some of them were really old and Mama had to dump the contents and wash the jars. But I bet she had over 200 jars. So if you're having a hard time finding jars, you may want to look up an elderly person or somebody that's recently passed that you knew canned, and that's a great source for jars if you're having trouble finding them. And we added about 3 quarts of water to our canner. And now we're going to place the jars in there. And Mama was insistent on doing this herself, and she still will get on to me. She's canned a lot this year. Over 200 quarts of tomatoes and tomato juice and spaghetti sauce and salsa. So this pressure canner fits 7 quarts. Now this old pressure canner, the lid on it is hard to push down, unlike my newer one. And the metal is really thick on it. But you're talking about no water leaking out like on the newer pressure canners. They are sealed. And it's a Presto Model 7B. So let that steam roll out of there for a good 10 minutes. I got the timer on before you put the weight on. Now we also used another pressure canner that doesn't have a dial gauge. It just has the weight, and you let it get to ticking, and once it's at a steady rate, then you start your timer. Now this is the first time I've ever canned with one of these. Now you do this on 10 pounds of pressure, and you do quarts for 1 hour and 25 minutes, pints for 55 minutes. And when you take them out and sit them on your counter on a towel and leave them undisturbed for 12 to 24 hours. And again, she was persistent and doing all this herself. Now you can probably tell this is my kitchen here, and once I got them back home, I checked the seals on all of them to make sure they had all sealed, and they did. And my mama had wrote on them. She didn't write what it was, but look at that handwriting. Every time I open one of these soups, I'll think about her.